And if you're watching this webinar, I'm assuming that you know quite a bit about the industrial carbon management strategy and about carbon capture and storage, carbon capture technologies generally, because of course the Commission came forward with its communication on February the 6th. I'm Chris Davies. I'm the Director of Carbon Capture and Storage Europe, which is a campaign body which recognises that we are going to need this technology in order to meet net zero targets by 2050. And I'm very pleased to welcome today Tatiana Marquez from the Cabinet of Energy Commissioner Kadri Simson. And I hope, Tatiana, that now that the Commission has published the communication, we're going to be able to discuss what happens next. And to suggest what does need doing, I'm joined by representatives of 3 members of CCS Europe. That's Cristina, Ballester. Cristina, I apologize. I'll almost certainly mangle the pronunciation of your names. Please feel free to correct me. Cristina is Vice President, Large Industries Europe for Air Liquide, a company that's a world leader in gases and services for industry. I'm joined also by Valeria Palmisano, Head of EU Institutional Affairs at Snam, which is not only the main transporter of gas in Italy, but works in many other countries as well. And also by Lina, Nagell, Senior Management Projects and EU Policy with Bellona Europe, Bellona Europa, which is an environmental NGO which can claim to have been arguing the case for CCS, almost alone amongst environmental NGOs, for more than 30 years. So, Tatiana, please let me start with you. The first statement in the communication that really leapt out at me was that which said that carbon capture was indispensable to achieve climate neutrality. And the paper explained that we need carbon capture to reduce emissions from hard to abate industrial sectors. We needed to take CO2 already out of the atmosphere. We'll need the technology also to provide some of the for use to provide aviation fuel and the like at a lower carbon rate than is currently the case. So indispensable. Now that's quite a word. Is that the strongest commitment, if you like, that the Commission has ever made to the fact that carbon capture is going to play a key part in future policy?
But I think, Chris, is definitely an acknowledgement that if you want to achieve net zero carbon economy by 2050, you cannot neglect any single decarbonization technology, and we will need all of them basically to make sure that we achieve our objective. Carbon capture and storage and carbon capture and use has a potential which is very, very, very high. And although in the end it will be for the member states to decide and for the market to decide whether they want to rely on this technology, the modeling that we have made for the 2040 climate target plan is very clear that under whatever scenario that you look at, a very important amount of CO2 emissions will need to be captured in 2030, 2040, and of course in 2050. I hope that the little technical problem that I had, it was not an issue for you. So I was saying that under whatever scenario, you will need to have quite a lot of CO2 capture and storage. And yeah, I mean, for us at European level, independently of whether there would be or there would not be some member states who would choose to go through carbon capture and storage, at EU level, there will be very important emissions capture through this technology.
Let me pick you up on that, though, because although, of course, it is, and we'll come back to this many times, I think, during the course of the next hour, member states are utterly crucial here in delivering. You're suggesting that they have some flexibility when it comes to interpretation, but you are saying, you as the Commission are saying, carbon capture is indispensable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean,
yes,
that's quite a message to send out to them. It's also a message, I'll bring in Lina in a moment, but it's also a message for some environmental NGOs who are deeply skeptical about carbon capture.
Mm. Well, I mean, carbon capture, I mean, what we are looking in our climate target plan is rather at EU level. So we look at the total number of emissions that we will have to have in 2030, 2040, 2050 to reach net neutrality in 2050. So, of course, it might happen that in some member states you do not have this technology, but at EU level there should be this technology, or we will not meet our climate objectives. That's clear for us. And if you take into account that it is a technology that would be essential to decarbonize certain sectors that are very hard to abate, notably in some industry, well, it would in the end be a choice of member states and the market whether they want to remain in some parts of the EU or not, depending on whether you have the possibility to store and use the CO2 that is captured or not.
Yeah, well, Lina, that's the message. You work, of course, with other environmental NGOs, and yet many of them are deeply critical of CCS. They see it as a diversion of resources. They see it as a means of propping up fossil fuels. Tatiana's just, of course, come back to the hard-to-abate industry sectors that they have no alternative but carbon capture as a means of reducing their emissions. Do you think this communication sends a message out to environmental NGOs as well as to member state governments?
Indeed, I think that one of the things that we have seen when it comes to carbon capture and storage is that when we are communicating about it, we are trying to communicate where CCS can play a role. So because CCS is not the silver bullet solution, and I think that's what many NGOs or environmentalists are worried about, that there will be an over-reliance where CCS will not be targeted, where there are no other options in a timely and a scalable way. I think that this is just an issue that we will also experience more, unfortunately, also with the public. And we have talked also about public perception, and it's also mentioned in the strategy where I think we will have to focus quite a bit more. I think that the strategy, first of all, congratulations to the Commission. It is a great piece of work and something we've waited on, and we're extremely happy to see. I do think, unfortunately, also that in this strategy as well, there is perhaps as a symptom, as all of society, to conflate different terms that maybe aren't properly understood by a lot of the recipients of the strategy. So this means, what is the difference between CCS and CCU and CDR and DAX and BECS, these kind of things, and what role they can play and should play in the fight against climate change, I think needs a bit clarification. And I think luckily we have a chance to do that in the fall when we have to actually follow through on this strategy with actions.
Thank you. Cristina, let me bring you in. Air Liquide, you're already embarking on CCS. I mean, in terms of blue hydrogen, making hydrogen, extracting capturing the CO2 to ensure it doesn't escape into the atmosphere. And of course, you also, I think, are manufacturing potential capture equipment. So you've got quite a stake in this. When it comes to what's your impression of the communication? Does it make it easier for you, or does it leave a lot of unanswered questions?
Yes, we hope it will be easier for the developers of the technologies. As you said, Air Liquide develops and already operates CO2 capture technologies. Precisely, we started by our own hydrogen production, but this technology are also essential for the hard-to-abate sectors. So based on our experience, we consider transparency and rigor in the operation of the different blocks of the CCUS chain are essential to ensure the decarbonization of the industry, because that will reduce the uncertainties and the risks that are perceived today. So we have, we will of course welcome the Commissioning work on this strategy and the recognition of CCS in the 2040 and beyond targets. But if I go further, I think that on the three decarbonization pathways that the Commission includes in the strategy, to me, ideally, the capture CO2 must be either permanently stored or used before we start on, direct air capture technologies. Because at the end, what we want is to protect our existing industries while giving them the opportunity to act against climate change. So we agree that this low carbon economy relies on the fast development of CO2 infrastructure networks to start with. But it's true that the market is very early. We are starting on that. So an excess of regulatory framework is also scaring the industries. I'm talking in the name of our customers. sometimes it scares the industries, because an excess of regulation can usually be seen as providing more uncertainties on the timing and the interpretation of the member state or transposition. So I think it's important for Europe to provide regulatory certainty and transparency, and also, of course, open access to CO2 storage.
Thank you. Valeria, what gets me about the proposals here and some of the target figures that are being suggested is the sheer scale of what is required. For example, there's a suggestion here that we need 7,000 kilometers of CO2 transport routes provided within 6 years by 2030. Now, some of that's going to be provided by shipping, but coming from the pipeline point of view, are we realistic about building 7,000 kilometers worth of CO2 transportation within 6 years? Is this going to happen?
Hi, Chris. Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. Let's start with consideration. And this is a consideration that we do as Snam, being an infrastructure operator, which means that we are along the value chain in between the emitters and the storage sites. This is a question about the competitiveness of the model that we want to envisage in Europe for CCUS, which means that we have to compare the cost of transporting the CO2 from the emission site to the storages, and we have to compare this number with the alternative solutions that we might want to have at hand. Now, it's true that we have different options at the moment to transport CO2 from the emission sites to the storage sites. What we have in mind, because this is something we're familiar with, because it's something we're confronting with on a practical point of view, is the hub for the CCUS of Ravenna that we are developing with big industrial partners and important industrial partners of Italy, and which is due to become the largest hub for CCS in the Mediterranean, which is an area that typically doesn't see a lot of these industrial realities. Well, there, of course, we are starting from an existing pipeline that we will connect the compression station of Casal Borsetti to the storage of Ravenna, and another part will have to be rebuilt. But let's not forget that at European level, we have a huge legacy in terms of infrastructural endowment that now we're using for natural gas, and that is already connected to big industrial consumption sites where typically you have the hard to abate and the bulk of emissions. So it would be, I believe, a missed opportunity not to look at the role of these infrastructure that we already have. Yeah,
and the Commission touches upon that, doesn't it? It says there should be we should be looking at how to do this.
Yeah, of course, and we can elaborate further on this happily so. We need a regulatory framework for this. Of course, the strategy is the first building block, and it goes in the right direction, giving an important message on the fact that we have to update a bit the regulatory framework, in particular for infrastructures where we would like to see, of course, a third-party access model, because this would bring the opportunity to scale up the critical mass needed. But yeah.
But you're saying there's work to be done, but it is feasible. The building of such an extensive pipeline of transportation network, it can be done.
Let me say it can be done. Of course, the condition needs to be there, meaning the industry needs to remain in Europe. We need to have sufficient volumes. So capture needs to be there. Financing needs to be there, and so on. But let me say, transportation is it has to be seen as also the competitive hedge of the overall exercise on this.
Okay. All right, Tatiana. The member states, the crucial role here. Now, we know within the European Union, Denmark and the Netherlands have taken a lead in actually developing CCS development policies with strategies and financial support and the like. I wonder, though, I mean, to what extent does a country like Denmark actually need this communication? It's just getting on and making things happen.
Well, I think that for this, nevertheless, communication at European level brings also not just to Denmark, but also to investors in general, certainty that this is a technology that the EU supports, and that well, they can count on not only the actions and the resources that countries individually, like Denmark, could have, but that we ourselves are also looking into how to help this technology to scale up at European level. Certainly today we have as a very important incentives for capturing the CO2, the ETS, but the ETS we know is not enough. We are also looking within the next revision of the ETS to see to what extent we can also count for instance, the CO2 emissions that are used into the ETS system. We are also giving support through the Innovation Fund currently to CCS projects, and we would like that over the future. We have a similar development to the one that we have with hydrogen and the Hydrogen Bank, where we use funds from the Innovation Fund to support the production and sale of hydrogen, basically bridging the gap between the price of conventional hydrogen and the price of renewable hydrogen. One can think about similar auctions as a service to be provided by the Commission also for CO2 projects. So,
yeah, if I may, I mean, you can do certain things, and we'll come on to those, regulatory instruments and the like. But fundamentally, if you look at Denmark and the Netherlands, it is the member states that will drive this forward. As you said yourself, it's up to them to decide, as you said before, it's up to them to decide to what extent they want to embrace carbon capture technologies. Mm-hmm. But as you know, and in the communication, it says, you spelt out, the governments still need to recognize, the majority of governments still need to recognize CCS as legitimate and necessary. And the majority, you look at the national energy and climate plans, the drafts, the majority of member states simply have not even followed the Commission guidelines in saying, what requirements there may be for carbon capture deployment. I mean, if you can't win the hearts and minds of these ministers to drive forward the policies, this is not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It is. I mean, we can facilitate the framework. We can provide funds at the European level. We can provide a regulatory framework for the CO2 transport or storage to happen. But in the end, relying on a specific technology, it's something that is decided by the market, provided that the member state where you are established allow you to put in place that technology. If you do not have, indeed, the regulatory framework in the country to do capturing or to do storing, it's absolutely impossible. This is why we think, although we can, of course, not oblige member states to uptake this technology, we think that we have also to be consistent, especially in the national European climate plans, in the national energy and climate plans, that if you say you are going to capture a certain amount of CO2 by 2030, you have to put the means for this to happen. You cannot just count that it will happen on its own.
So, Cristina, looking around as you're working with governments, you're talking with ministers and the like, do they get it? I mean, you are practically engaged as a company, Liquide, in building plants which require carbon capture technology. You're promoting this, and yet, and I take it you agree with the aspirations of the Commission, but so many ministers just haven't got the message.
No. I mean, it's not equally supported in the different member states, but yes, some governments are supporting on the CCS strategy. For instance, France now has announced the support of the development of CO2 hubs in the 3 CO2 hubs in France as the first priority. In the Netherlands, we have a contract for difference for I mean, we are already launching the execution of the capture plant of one of the largest hydrogen sites that we have. We capture half a ton of CO2 per year, half a million ton. So the Netherlands, France, Belgium, there are countries that are supportive to develop the infrastructure needed, so supporting the ports, also helping to develop the project, bringing facilities, plot, permitting. I mean, it's not equally done in other countries. Some of them, yes, they realize that this is the fast and a more efficient way to quickly abate CO2 for the existing industries. Yes.
Okay, Lina, you excuse me, my voice is going. Lina, but I said at the beginning that Bellona's been working on CCS for 30 years. I've only been working on it for 16 years, so it's a mere nothing. You welcomed the Commission's communication, and yet you must be very frustrated about the slow rate of progress. And I suppose, just looking at the fact that back in 2007, the Commission produced a communication calling for CCS, and nothing happened. And now it's calling for now it's published a communication calling for CCS within a very tight timescale. Do you think we can really bring about the change necessary to finally realise the development of this technology?
I think it's the only option. So I think that to be in this sector and work, you have to be positive. And I think that, of course, we could be stuck in kind of a stampede of all the actions that have been lost, but or the opportunities for actions that have been lost. But I think now it's time to look forward. And I think one of the things I found so exciting in the strategy is, of course, the focus on creating a market. And that the EU is actually taking this ball and running with it, because I think that the EU has so much competency when it comes to ensuring properly functioning internal markets, and also now for CO2. So I'm very excited, and I hope that it will be kick-started in the fall. And if I can just also maybe touch upon one of the points that Tatiana has mentioned as well, on saying that it will be up to the market to decide, the role of CCS here. I think it's important to reflect on that. One of the main things that we need this strategy to do is to help us actually kickstart and create a market, because that has been one of the main kind of barriers, is that we don't have a market because of persistent market failures. But with this strategy, we're actually seeing very concrete political initiatives to address them, together with the Net Zero Industry Act, together with the CCUS Forum, and all of the other kind of funding and support mechanisms that the Commission has pushed through. And then, as all of you mentioned as well, now it's over to the member states to make sure that this is also followed up there.
Well, just on that point, on the creation of a market, Tatiana, there was a mention in the communication about the suggestion that there should be requirements for low carbon products to provide an incentive for the first movers in, shall we say, in cement, who may want to be able to. Who may want to be able to develop low carbon cement, but would have to charge a premium price for that. And yet there's not actually any specific proposal in the communication.
It is true. I mean, this is one of the things where we, in the strategy, maybe we have not become still concrete enough about what kind of measures we think we could take in order to promote this low carbon product, and I think the reason is because it is an issue that probably needs also to be looked at in a broader perspective. So it is not just products that capture CO2 permanently that you would need to be paid with a premium. The same happens with, certain circular economy products, energy efficiency products in construction, and so on. There are already some things for instance, in public procurement legislation already. I think we should revisit it probably from a broader perspective, which is not, as I said, just specific to CO2 captured products. And certainly the next Commission will need to look into that, because the premium issue is common to many different green products.
And we could also talk about negative emissions, because, for example, the waste to energy operators and the like would say, if you want to incentivize us to develop CCS, we need, if there was a charge made through the ETS system for emitting CO2, then there should be a reward paid if we're actually able to take by capturing CO2 from biogenic sources, if we're able to actually generate negative emissions.
Certainly, and in the Commission communication, you also have a reference to, the Commission is going to explore the possibility of also including landfills in ETS. This will be an additional incentive, to use the waste for all the purposes that landfilling. And through combining it with CCUS, you can indeed have negative emissions in a waste-to-energy plant. The same for biomass plants. You are basically producing energy with a renewable source. If you capture the the remaining CO2 emissions from that plant, you will have negative emissions. This would need over time to be recognized fully in the legislation, and we will be looking at it in the next revision of the ETS.
I mean, how long is that going to take, do you think? I mean, when can people start drawing up plans to develop carbon capture plants at waste to energy facilities, knowing that there's going to be some sort of income stream because that's been brought into being by new regulations? How many years off is that?
Well, I mean, I'm not responsible for the ETS legislation, but I think that it's in a couple of years that we have the next revision. There are already waste to energy plants which are working on capturing storage. I visited myself one in Oslo a couple of years ago. This is something that it is happening, but obviously, if these plants would have an additional incentive, additional ETS allowances and so on, this will help them certainly to round the business case.
Okay, thank you. Can we turn onto the issue of regulatory standards for the transportation of CO2? An issue which some people have said is an absolute defining point if we're going to build this huge CO2 transportation network. People need to know what requirements there will be for the levels of CO2 purity that's captured. What about the pressures, about the temperatures and such like? Valeria, does this concern you? I mean, you're going to be doing the transportation. I'm surprised that this issue has not been resolved a long time ago by European standards bodies.
In a way, there is not a comprehensive standard, but there is indeed a work in progress with different expert groups that are working also to the benefit of the CCS forum that, of course, start looking at these aspects. My understanding is, but here we go into a very technical aspect, that the level of purity depends also on the form under which the CO2 is transported, and the range needed for the transportation via pipeline should not perhaps follow the super stringent requirements that we can envisage for the liquid transportation. But other than that, the answer is yes, the standards do concur to creating the framework and the requirements that are needed. Of course, it depends on the entire value chain again, because we are in the middle. So it's like many other adaptations that the energy infrastructure is doing to carry different type of vectors. So in the case of CO2, of course, we will look at these technical aspects, but let me say they're not probably the hardest part in the game by nature.
You think so? I just wondered, to what extent can you make investments without knowing, without having an answer to that question? I mean, I've talked, for example, to ArcelorMittal about CO2 capture at steelworks, and they are concerned about some of the standards being proposed by some of the early storage site operators, because they say, we could meet these standards, but the cost of meeting these standards is so huge, would just make carbon capture that much more difficult to achieve, hugely costly, difficult to maintain, a steel plant on that basis. So you've got to get these fundamentals right, haven't you? I mean, the Commission recognises this. It's just the frustration is that standard bodies haven't perhaps taken a lead on this before now. But you're okay, Cristina. Maybe I can bring you in, because you've got a blue hydrogen plant. Air Liquide are building a blue hydrogen plant at Rotterdam. Now I'm told that of some of the pipelines, the storage sites we can think of, that Northern Lights off Norway and the Portos project at Rotterdam, at the Aramis project at Antwerp, they will all have slightly different requirements for CO2 standards, which just shows, presumably that is not the direction we want to go if we want a competitive open market across the whole of the EU.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely something that we have to solve. The lack of standardization of the purity that is the minimum requires, the requisition that is the storage owner needs to be well understood, because, okay, lack of standardization of proper analysis and information finally is driving the requirements to request food grade CO2. I mean, absolutely, I don't think that we need to maximize the degree of purity because of lack of knowledge. I mean, maybe it's too early, but I think we have to work on that, because the change of the specification during the process of the project development is impacting a lot. All the decisions, the FIDs, the designs, the cost of development, everything is affected by this lack of standardization, and not only the lack of standardization, but the requirements of a high degree of purity without knowing exactly what is the impurity or the number of impurities that are really the ones that we have to tackle. Not, I mean, not the food grade, as I said, requirement. Yeah. So I encourage the regulation on that part. I encourage more standardization on the requirement. It will affect the transportation. It will affect the pipeline design, the hub, the storage, everything. So
it could, if we don't have this standardization, it could slow down investment, could it not, even further?
It is happening, and I can tell you, I also talked to ArcelorMittal that it is happening. But not only for that, I mean, all the projects that we are ongoing today are affected by these constant changes or changes of the specifications. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, if you ask someone who's not touched upon carbon capture and storage in any depth before, the first question they tend to ask is CO2 storage safe? But Tatiana, in the communication, the Commission spells out CO2 storage is, quote, low risk, and especially low risk compared with methane storage, which is just routine, if you like, and celebrated as a means of keeping us warm in winter when Russia's invading Ukraine. So it might be that we don't want to mention risk at all, but as it comes in terms of getting public acceptance for this, do you think we can win people round? Because the CO2 storage directive came into being in 2009, and it had the support of the council, but I think it was 8 member states then introduced bans on CO2 storage on their territories, suggesting great concern, if you like, about CO2 storage. Can we address that? Because obviously it makes life much more difficult.
Yes, of course. I mean, it makes things much more difficult. The first thing indeed is to say is, yes, if you do the things right, it's a safe technology. And looking, for instance, at the only example we have currently in Europe, which are the Norwegians, who are storing the CO2 in the continental shelf, you see that they have an experience of several decades already of storing it safely without, important incidents. I think that indeed, even member states who have banned, legally speaking, in their legislation, storage of CO2, I think that they are thinking twice now, more in the sense that, well, many of them, they have realized that it would be a technology that would be essential to decarbonize certain of the industrial companies they have in the territory, and if they want to keep them there, I mean, this is one of the ways to making sure that they can decarbonize. Of course, I think it's also our role as policymakers and the member states who are closer to the citizens at the regional and global level to explain the technology, the real risks of the technology and the advantages of it. It's very important for whatever technology that comes new in the market, not only to give information to people, but also that the people having a project of capture and storage close to their place, they also get some type of benefits for the project. They also participate on the benefits of that the project is generated. And we have seen the same type of public acceptance issue in technologies that are much more extended today, like renewables. And we see that, you know, the good practices, the good examples there where renewables have, you know, better accepted by people is where people participate, people are well informed, people participate in the important decisions concerning the installation, where to install it, and people participate also somehow in the benefits of the project.
Indeed. Lina, you've done work on this, and Bellona certainly has. Okay, Norway, your country, may be storing CO2 offshore, but Denmark is looking at a number of onshore sites. I think France is too. Where are we up to on the issue of public acceptance? I think you know, those of us who talk about carbon capture and compare it with methane, we may not have any concerns at all, but I suspect the public still does have concerns, and they can be whipped up too. They can be whipped up, you know, by those who, for various reasons, are simply opposed to the technology.
Indeed, and we do see that. We see that there are still narratives circulating of this being an unproven technology, which is simply not true. But it's something that is being repeated, and we do see that, of course, there is a lot of concern, which I think is natural when new technology, at least in the perception of different countries. It might not be new for Norway, but for other countries it is. I think it's normal that there is some skepticism, and I think we have to meet that skepticism with a respect and information, and they're focusing much more on dialogue than perhaps trying to win people over, because I think that taking these concerns seriously is the only way in which we will be able to address them. And if we're confident enough in the technology, that should not be a problem. I think that Tatiana also has a really good point when she mentions specifically ensuring that local communities where, you know, this will take place are active participants also in getting some of these benefits. That's something I think we have seen in particular when it comes to the potential of onshore storage. That there's been several studies, for example, in I think it's in Denmark, that shows that this can actually have a positive effect. And of course, we have now the Public Perception Working Group as part of the CCS Forum, which will be continued this year as well. It was also last year. And I think this is something that, if we see this in connection with also the need to get member states to push forward on their ambition, I think these two things need to go hand in hand. And here I think that we can learn from each other at a European level, but of course there are very different circumstances in different countries. For example, the Norwegian public is much more positive towards this type of technology than probably a lot of other countries will be, due to its experience with oil and gas extractions in the past. For other countries, there will be very different concerns and very different information and dialogue shaping that is necessary.
Okay, thank you. I want to come back to the scale up required and the acceleration, the short timescales in order to meet some of the targets. Valeria, just on a practical basis, if we've seen in Denmark, in a very short period of time, a development of a new strategy, all party support for CCS, policies put in place, and progress being made, final investment decisions taken. In the case of this, transportation of CO2, how long does it actually take for you to not only build a pipeline, but get the regulatory approval, to get permissions and things? What sort of timescales does it take if you're told we need a 500-kilometer pipeline being built?
Look, I started from some information on the Italian context that is probably helpful, because countries in the northern sphere of Europe were mentioned, but let me remind that Italy has already included the reference to CCS in its National Energy Climate Plan of 2019. CCS has been already, and this was acknowledged by the CCS communication, mentioned in the updated draft NECP. And most recently, we have Italy has published an energy decree in 2023, which lays the foundation of a future Italian design for developing CCS. And now let's come to the timeline that we can envisage, having in mind the project of Ravenna, again, that we are developing together with ENI and the industrial players of the region. That I remember, it's a region that it's been historically devoted to the oil and gas sector, and for which we have interesting data data from a recent study we made with Ambrosetti that show also the numbers, and I refer to what was mentioned before, on the positive impact on employment that CCS projects can bring in the region. So going back to milestones and phases that we can imagine, consider that we are starting from an existing pipeline from our perspective. So the question will be on the new pipeline that will have to be built. But this new pipeline that will have to be built will be say between 2026 and 2030, when we will have a potential expansion of the project. And just to give you a rough idea of the numbers, we said in no slides, but numbers I think can probably stick to the mind. We will start from a first phase of 25 kilotons of CO2 by year to be stored in the offshore site of Ravenna in 2024. And then this can go up to 4 million tons of CO2 per year as of 2026. And after 2030, we can go up to 16 million tons of CO2 per year.
Okay.
So let's say that between now and 2030, this exercise can be completed, partly relying on an existing transportation infrastructure, partly relying on a new bit that will have to be constructed.
Okay, that's I think for me that's reassuring. That's a good pace. Cristina, Air Liquide are one of the few people that have actually taken a final investment decision to embark upon a capture plant, or converting grey hydrogen to blue hydrogen. What are the timescales involved? How long does it take from you're looking at the time what's being envisaged here by the Commission? How long does it take to make things happen?
Well, I mean, the execution of a project, it takes like an industrial time of 2.5, 3 years. But since we started project development until we took the final investment decision, we were developing the project for another 3 years. So typically, a new capture project, CCS project today, for either our own hydrogen plants or when we work with cement industries or the steel industries, it takes 5 years since the concept of the process and the project to the FIP, the first industrial production. Yeah, that's my experience, because all of those technologies and infrastructure needed, we are working several companies together, and we need to align on the timing of the decisions. We need to also develop the economical case, of course. As we are always saying, that funding and subsidies are necessary to launch the market. One day will not be, but today is too early, and we need these programs to help the industry to take decisions. So then to have a good and solid business case, we need to launch 1 year of front-end engineering. We need to develop firm offers and fair capex to be sure that we are taking the right decision. So it's a long process, I would say. Yeah.
Did I get there? About 5 years, did you say, from concept to delivery?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot to be done, Tatiana. 2030 is 6 years off, and there's a fair number of regulatory instruments that have got to be introduced before then. So it's all tight. It's all tight, isn't it? It's all got to push. And I suppose let me come back to you then. I mean, at the end of the day, we all know the Commission is coming to the end of its life. You've produced the communication. There's a period now where people are thinking about the next Commission. Does everything go a bit quiet now, or will there be a real push by the Commission to drive this forward so that the next Commission comes in and runs with it?
Well, I think it would be from my perspective, of course, I can't decide myself what are going to be the priorities of the next Commission. But if I look at all the work that we have done in the past on renewables and energy efficiency, which were absolutely necessary to decarbonize the energy sector, I think that it is carbon capture and storage and hydrogen, the next two technologies that we need to bring them to an industrial scale, as we have had in the past with renewables. So, I mean, I think the numbers, as mentioned at the beginning, the numbers of the climate plan and the climate target plan are very clear. We will need this technology to decarbonize. We will need also this technology to make sure that certain industries stay in Europe, and they do not basically delocalize and go elsewhere where in the end they will continue having even more probably CO2 emissions. So and also this is a technology that gives a lot of potential growth and jobs possibilities for the European economy. Let's be clear, it's one of the technologies where Europe is relatively well positioned to lead globally. So I think that it is in the interest of all the EU, the member states, the Commission, that this will be among the priorities of the next energy commissioner. But now we have a strategy which has been adopted by the Commission. The Commission will change. We will have elections in 3 months. We will have a new commissioner of energy. And despite that, DG Energy and the Commission continues working now with a very clear political steer of what are the different actions that we will need to develop, and there's continuity.
Axel Eggert from Eurofer, the European Steel Association, made a comment yesterday about how difficult it would be to persuade householders across Europe to achieve a 90% reduction in their CO2 emissions by 2040. You can imagine, everyone's going to have heat pumps, everyone's going to have solar power, everyone's going to have electric vehicles, and we all know that we had 1,000 tractors in Brussels the other week. So difficult to achieve some of these changes. And one of the points he was making, I think, was it's actually potentially easier for industry to make some of these changes than it is to try and get the whole of the public engaged. Now, the 2040 strategy, 2040 targets, and this communication came out at the same time. Tatiana, do you see that there's the opportunity? Was this deliberate? Was this an opportunity to point out that some of these 2040 targets are harder to achieve than others, and actually decarbonizing industry with carbon capture as part of the package may be easier than persuading every householder to bring about the changes in their own lifestyles?
Well, everybody has to play its part in the fight against climate change. This is what we think in the Commission, and we think that everybody can do something at their at individual level. Of course, the big emitters of industry are certain sectors, certain industries, and certain sectors like transport or even agriculture. We need to tackle these sectors from a holistic, comprehensive perspective, because indeed it will be easier to come up with results. We have the example of the energy sector. We have, in the last 20 years, managed to decarbonize to a very great extent the production of energy. So if we have managed to do it in the energy sector, I'm absolutely convinced that we will also manage to do it, in the steel sector or the cement sector, or why not also the transport sector, now that we are looking into electrification, hydrogen, and other possibilities.
Okay. Let me steer the discussion now towards a conclusion and looking at the wish list, if you like, the things that we need doing. We raised before the issue of member states and the need to have their engagement. I just wonder to what extent industry can be playing a part here in persuading governments of the need to embrace this policy and to take it forward. Cristina, again, do you think yourself and other industry leaders are doing enough to persuade political policymakers across Europe of the need to invest and support deployment of this technology?
Well, I think, yes, Liquide is very active in the many countries, advocating for our willingness to help industry with our technologies, our investments. We are ready to be promoters of solutions, global solutions, so to develop the CCS projects. But we are actively requesting infrastructures, speeding the permitting process, open access for CO2 storage, incentive to capex and opex to mitigate the cost of the industries to take the decision, we are also pursuing and also advocating towards the demand of low carbon products. Incentivizing the demand will only help the development of the infrastructure, because at the end, Valeria, we need volumes. I mean, the infrastructure needs to be filling with something. So also we are actively asking for clarification of the quality and specifications, and sometimes that is also, I mean, I would like also to say that for me, the front runners are heroes today. They are opening a market, and I think the efforts that the industry that are taking the first decision needs to be accompanied with somehow a release on the big liabilities that they are taking. Because apart from engaging on CapEx and OpEx commitment, whatever happen, and a schedule or an avoidable event can make the companies to be liable to pay twice for the cost that they have engaged with, and also for the CO2, again, the emissions that they are going to pay because of this unavoidable event. All of these risks, I think, that need to be managed to say, okay, at least like a grant period for companies that have invested, to say, okay, it's a force majeure, I cannot afford to pay everything. I mean, I think that the industry shall have like a recognition of efforts.
Okay, thank you. And Lina, do you agree? I mean, or does industry be doing more? And what can we all do to persuade governments to do more?
I definitely think that industry is doing an important job, and I think it even more could be done in trying to, of course, coordinate also with member states there, trying to bring them on board. We had the CCS forum in Aalborg, where we had a lot of industry representatives, and we're seeing that they have quite a lot of influence in the countries where they are active. So bringing that on board, making sure that these member states come on, that would be really useful. I also think, as being mentioned here, we need to reduce, of course, the risk for these first movers. But I think it's also really crucial when we're looking into how we are trying to optimize kind of this market development, that we keep in mind that we are developing CCS for climate impact reasons. We're not developing CCS for CCS's sake. And I think that is something that we all in the panel agree to. I think that we need to remember that also when we are developing these support mechanisms, we need to remember that they should be temporal. They should not be permanent. They need to kickstart a market that can function on its own. And when we are developing and trying to provide the support to reduce risk and enable market development, we also have to look very closely into how are we then setting up a long-term market for the best function. And sometimes this doesn't mean, for example, that it's only the cost of abatement we need to look at when selecting projects. Sometimes it's different market actors. Sometimes it's reducing potential monopolistic tendencies. It's ensuring geographical dispersity. And that's one of the things I'm the most excited about, of course, this market regulation, maybe we can call it, what it will look like and exactly how it will try to ensure a well-functioning market.
Thank you. And Tatiana, what about you? Would it be helpful? Do you want industry to be doing more to raise the profile of this and to be arguing more strongly?
Well, I think, I mean, each industry is different, each company is different, and they have different, different strategies of decarbonization. So what we are trying to provide with this strategy and all the works that we are doing in other technology is to provide the industry as much choice as possible to be able to decarbonize at the lower cost. This is why we are doing what we are doing in CCUS. It is the responsibility ultimately for each industry to decide how they want to get there, how they want to clean themselves and decarbonize. And certainly, if they go for the choice of using carbon capture and storage, it is very useful, obviously, that they also pass the message to the member states where they are established, that they would need a certain regulatory framework which enables that they can capture and store the CO2 that they capture. It is something that, I mean, this is a message, I think, that for the governments that are, more hesitant about this technology, is something that it would help indeed if there is also a message from the industry towards those governments.
Yeah, thank you very much. Valeria, let's look at the wish list, really. Snam, you've given an impression in Italy that Snam is working in a very cooperative manner with the Italian government in terms of looking at some of these policies. I think Italy has a national energy and climate plan, which is very positive when it comes to CCS. What do you want? What do you need more from member states or from the Commission to take this forward?
Yeah, let me ask, working with the government, but also with the industry, something that I wanted to also refer to, which is important also for what Cristina said on getting the volumes there. We have launched, but you can find a lot of information on our website, www.snam.it, a call for interest for industrial players on CO2 transport towards the Ravenna hub, which means it's a sort of market test for those who know the term, two sides, and to see what actually are the needs, also in terms of volumes. So this would be a non-binding interest, which is going to be very important for us. So as you see, we're in dialogue with the government, but also with industrial players to make sure that the whole exercise is brought together. As per the wish list, I might repeat a lot of things that have been said. Regulatory certainty, of course, I'm resorting to the power of the obvious here, but regulatory certainty, simple rules, clear standards are, of course, a necessary condition for investments to happen and for final investment decisions to be taken. Adequate financing, of course, we know that at European level there are different tools. The Innovation Fund was mentioned. We also have the Connecting Europe facility, which plays an important role when it comes to cross-border projects. We might want to open the discussion to innovative instruments that look a bit at what it's been done for the hydrogen. So we drop it there. CCS Bank might be something to look at. And of course, all sort of de-risking mechanisms that can help developing these projects as fast as possible.
Very good. Remind me not to ask you what you want from Father Christmas, because the list might be very long. Okay. Cristina, what's on your wish list? What does Air Liquide want from the Commission or from member state governments?
Well, I think that it was said, but now probably one of our main points is something that member state can act on is on the permitting, on the supporting project, helping the promoters of projects, the developers of projects to be fast and agile on the decisions. That's to me the first thing. And also, I would say that I mean we are very much supporting and thankful for the Innovation Fund support for many projects already, on many CCS projects. But due to the inflation, of course, and the time of the project development, we found that is not enough to cover the gap, and including the premium of the low carbon products. So I would say member states should be open again to help finally to close the gap with the contract for difference mechanism, just to really help on the final decision of the industries that are working on these processes.
Thank you. And Lina, the Bellona wish list.
Yeah, so I think that of course we first on our wish list is to actually deliver what's in the strategy. That would be great, and in a timely way. I think that as mentioned, we need to by several participants, we need regulatory certainty. We need to reduce these investment risks, and then I think we need to pay more attention also to the issue of public perception. We don't like to call it public acceptance, because that is kind of implying that we need to kind of force someone to accept this. We really believe in this technology and its way to help in the fight against climate change. We think we need to be better at how we communicate this and in what way, and to highlight, the necessity of CCS in the just transition. So I think this will be on the top of my wish list going forward, also with the CCS forum. And then, of course, that was also mentioned here, more initiatives also for a market on low carbon products, which I know CCS Europe together with Bellona, Uriarte, and a lot of other actors signed a letter just before the strategy was released. So we will follow up on that and hoping we will see some more action there.
Thank you. Well, Tatiana, on my wish list would be the emissions trading system and to stop finance ministers taking money out of it, which perhaps should be returned to the industries which are actually investing in CCS. And as free allowances come to an end, and more companies are going to be paying for the emission, that money is going into the treasuries, and it would be very helpful if we could somehow ensure that it goes back to the companies to allow us to invest further. However, final word.
We
from
try,
you.
yeah.
What do you?
But,
Yeah, I know.
The best way not to pay the ETS allowance is not to emit.
Indeed, and there's always the questions of subsidiarity, of course. However, final word from you. What's on your wish list? Not just from the Commission, of course, but from member state governments and from NGOs and from industry and the like.
Well, I think for us, it would be really important is to continue having the support or even increasing support that we are having from the community. So from, the stakeholders in broad terms, NGOs, think tanks, industry of different kinds, technological institutes, and so on. They are very much contributing with their input and their, and their expertise in the different, in the different groups that we are organizing within the CCS forum. We will need their expertise also now very much in implementing the strategy, the knowledge-based platform. It will, feed with information that will come from different CCS projects, the roadmaps, the sectoral roadmaps that we want to elaborate under the new strategy. Will also need to count on the information provided by the industry, the observatory for for cement and waste to energy sectors that we promised the European Parliament that we will do this year. We will count also on the information that will come from the from the companies. So we need, of course, the member states to play a role in all this, but we also count on the general support from many different people who are working on carbon capture and storage at the moment. The type of cooperation that we are having at the moment should only increase and accelerate, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you very much indeed. That's all been very positive. Today, you've been listening to Tatiana Marquez from the Cabinet of the Energy Commissioner. You've been listening to Cristina Ballester of Liquide, Vice President, Large Industries Europe. From Valeria Palmisano, Head of EU Institutional Affairs with Snam. And Lina, Nagell, Senior Manager Projects and EU Policy with Europa, Bellona. Bellona, Europa, indeed. I'm Chris Davies. I'm Director of CCS Europe, which is an advocacy body that promotes CCS deployment. And we want you to join us and support us. So please look at our website and LinkedIn page and get in touch. To my guests, thank you all very much indeed for your participation today. I've been involved in CCS policy making for some 16 years now. Maybe things are really beginning to happen, but we're not yet at the tipping point. There's a lot of work to be done if we're to make it all happen. So thank you all for watching and listening. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all. Goodbye.